Hey everybody, it's me, Randy Ray. Wanted to talk to you about the books I read in May. So this is what they call a May reading wrap up, I guess. So I read 7 books in May, plus a bunch of short stories, which I'm going to cover in another video. I'm going to cover the books that I read in May that were not part of Horror Mayhem. That consists of 5 books. I'm going to cover them in the order that I read them. Normally, I read a few more books than this in a month, but some of these books were pretty long, especially this first one I'm going to talk about here, which is called Last Exit by Max Gladstone. This was my favorite book of May of 2023. And I read this because I'm working on a personal project where, I'm friends with Steve Donahue, and he makes a top 10 list for multiple genre categories in reading, and his science fiction and fantasy top 10 looked interesting to me. So this was one of the books on the list that looked interesting to me. I was a little bit skeptical going into it because I read This Is How You Lose the Time War, which was co-written by Max Gladstone, and I didn't care for it. I know that makes me unusual. It won the Nebula Award and the Hugo Award for Best Novella just a couple of years ago. My roommate is a big fan of science fiction stuff, and she really loved the book too, but it just didn't work for me. Last Exit, on the other hand, worked for me very well. Okay, one of the things that I liked about this is that the main character's name is Zelda, okay? And she's wandering around the country in a station wagon trying to stave off the rot, okay? I should hold this up so you can see it the whole time while I'm talking about it. So she's trying to hold off the rot, quote unquote. And basically she's got the ability to travel to and from alternate universes. Everybody, I think, is now familiar with the concept of a multiverse and alternate universes. And apparently, a decade ago, she did this with a bunch of her college buddies. But one of their team, who was, I guess, her girlfriend or really close to her, wound up getting left behind in one of the alternate universes. There's a possibility that this particular gal, Sal, who's Zelda's lover, is actually still alive. So Zelda, who's pretty beat up and basically homeless, and all she does is quote unquote adventure in these alternate universes, Zelda gets the gang back together. And they're all successful, normal people now. They're not traveling to alternate universes trying to save the multiverse as they were before. But they all reunite and go on one last adventure together. There are lots of hints to what happened when they were traveling from alternate universe to alternate universe before, so it gives it a really epic feel. But I thought the characterization was dead on. The writing was lovely. It's a very dense book. This is about 400 pages. These pages have a lot of words on them. But anyway, if you're into this sort of thing, it's sort of apocalyptic. They're trying to prevent the apocalypse. But if you're into this sort of thing, you can do a lot worse than Last Exit. I loved it. It was terrific. That was the first book I read in May. The next book I read in May, not counting the books from Horror Mayhem, I'm going to talk about those in another video. The next book I read in May was called Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigation. This was written by Erica Krause. And I'm trying to catch up on my Book of the Month Club books because I have been a Book of the Month Love subscriber, Book of the Month Club, not Book of the Month Love, Book of the Month Club subscriber now for several years. But I rarely read the books. So I'm trying to get caught up on those because they take up about 3 shelves in my bedroom library. But this is neat because it's a memoir, and it's also sort of like a true crime novel. It's written as if it were fiction. The main character is the author, who's also the narrator, and she becomes a private investigator as part of the story, which was one of the interesting things about it. She has, quote unquote, one of those faces, okay? So she meets people all the time who just tell her things that they never tell anybody else. And it just sort of happens in random. But in 2002, she meets a lawyer in a library who goes into confessional mode with her, then realizes, hey, this is the kind of person I need working for me. And so she winds up investigating a sexual assault committed by some football players at a college football. It's a true story. It's not hard to find the actual details of the case in the news, although she kind of hedges and, is a little vague about certain things and changes some names, but it's real easy to find the truth. Anyway, it's a reasonably compelling read. It was competently written. I enjoyed it. Didn't take a lot of time to finish. She has her own history, as many women do, with sexual assault and abuse and control, which also play a part in the narrative. But it's good if it's the kind of thing you like to read. I love courtroom drama, true crime, fictional, you name it. I love courtroom drama. So this kind of fit into the courtroom drama mold, even though you don't spend a lot of time in the courtroom. So it's not your typical mystery or true crime novel, okay? So then, in my effort to catch up on older books in the past that I probably should have read long before now, I got this hardcover copy of The Firm from Steve Donahue. He had an extra one by John Grisham, which I'd never read, but I know it was a popular movie with Tom Cruise. Never saw the movie either, okay? Didn't really know much about it until I started reading it. Then I had a big sense of deja vu. And that's when I realized I probably read the first quarter of this book at some point in the past, didn't finish it, DNF'd it. And, but I was kind of glad to come back to it. But to me, this book is strongest at the beginning when the main character, he's just graduated from Harvard Law School. He's in the top 3 graduates. He gets hired by this small, quirky law firm in Memphis, okay? They pay better than they ought to be paying. They're racist. They're sexist. They have a lot more say into the lives of the people who work there than would be common in a typical law firm. So it's kind of fishy to begin with, but the money and the perks are just hard to get away from. And so, he goes to work there, but then eventually, spoiler alert, I don't know how much of a spoiler alert you need for this novel. It's got to be 30 or 40 years old now. But the law firm's up to no good. The most interesting part is about how he goes to work at the law firm, how many hours he's working, how much money he's making, what the culture is like. When it starts to dig into the FBI getting in touch with him about the nefarious dealings at the law firm that he doesn't know about, and how they want him to, basically, become a rat on the law firm, that's where it really the story just kind of falls apart for me. The second half of the book was not nearly as good as the first part, but I did like the fact that the FBI was no more pleasant to deal with than the law firm, who are ostensibly the bad guys. But the FBI are kind of the bad guys in this too. Anyway, it's an entertaining read. John Grisham's kind of like eating ice cream or something. You can get through it really quickly and easily. And, it is what it is. He, in my opinion, is a much less literary author of courtroom drama type stuff than Scott Turow, who's my favorite in that particular field. It's a pretty solid novel, though. I'm going to watch the movie now after reading it. So, and now for complete change of pace. The next book I read, Quentin Tarantino, Cinema Speculation. I did not really know how I was going to feel about this book. I've seen a lot of interviews with Tarantino, and he's certainly really enthusiastic, but he has a tendency to sometimes be a little bit obnoxious. And I felt like in a nonfiction book that he had written about film, that would certainly come up. But he was a better, and I probably should have known he was going to do a good job writing this book, because I like the way he writes screenplays. I've seen all of his movies. In fact, he's one of the few directors where I make a point of going to the theater to see the latest Tarantino. There's been 9 so far. He's working on his 10th film. But this focuses on his movie-going heyday. It's sort of like gonzo film journalism, okay? And so he's talking about the movies that he likes and saw during the 70s. Tarantino's maybe 5-10 years older than I am. So, he was going to the movies in the early 70s when I was too young to go to the movies. I'm looking for the table of contents here so that I can share with you the films that he covers in here, because most chapters are about a specific film, although in true Tarantino style, okay, there's no table of contents. That's weird. But, he starts with stuff like Dirty Harry. I'm trying to remember that was all stuff from the early 70s. He covers Hardcore, which starred George C. Scott. It's one of my favorite movies. I love it. And he draws the comparisons to both Taxi Driver and The Searchers. Taxi Driver gets its own chapter. Deliverance gets its own chapter. Dirty Harry gets its own chapter. quite a few movies, but there are also chapters just on various topics or subjects. But he talks about The Getaway with Steve McQueen. Great movie to talk about in a book of movies about action cinema from the late 60s and early 70s. Anyway, I'd recommend this to you if you want to read a book where you've got a great director who's really knowledgeable about film, talk about his own work and the work of other directors, and some of the stuff about the casting and the getting these movies made process of the 70s. You're going to have a hard time beating this one, okay? So that's 4 out of 5. I need a sip of water because my mouth's getting dry. But I'm going to wrap this up with the last book I read in May. And it's another courtroom drama. And I did not mean for May to be the month of courtroom drama, but that's how it turned out. This is a novel called Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. And it is another Book of the Month Club book. And this one is about a Korean family who own a alternative medical treatment center in a submarine outside of a barn. And the idea is that they fill the submarine or the patients go in for treatment, they get extra oxygen, okay? It's some kind of, hyperbaric chamber or whatever. And it's supposed to cure just about everything, like most of these alternative medicine kind of things do. And anyway, it explodes one night, big fire, people get injured, people die, and the fire was set deliberately, but we don't know who set the fire, even though the court thing is going on and someone's been accused of it. It's a complicated story. There's a lot that went on. I thought it was really well written and a really solid novel. If that plot sounds like something you'd be interested in, it was good. I was not dissatisfied with any of the books that I read in May of 2023, but I'm about to make another video about the short stories that I read for Horror Mayhem. So if you're interested in the horror genre, you'll probably want to watch that next video. If not, you got to see all the books I read that weren't part of the horror genre. So thanks for watching this one, and I will be back with another video about the horror short stories that I read in May. Thanks for watching.